I like my art to be free. I don't know if I am the only one that has struggled with this, but one of my biggest challenges in my art career have been to move away from being very controlled and detailed and end up having artwork that looks too much, quote unquote, like the reference in the end, rather than having that looseness to it where you're just like boom, 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 adding color and you have that gut feeling and everything is just like you feel free and you feel creative. In other words, like achieving freedom in your art and what you're creating. This is still a struggle for me, so I wanted to share some thoughts I had on the subject. It's not going to be a like how to break away from this. It's more like thoughts about this concept and how I have shifted my own mind about it. First of all, I think acceptance is really important when it comes to being on a journey or achieving that freedom in your art, because for me, I think a lot of the times I have this like there's something in there that you need to scratch, like there's something in your mind, in your vision that needs to get out there, and then when you try to put it out in the world, it's like way far away from that. And for me, it's often that the things that come out are way more controlled than the output that I want to achieve in the end. Why I think acceptance is so important here is because if we don't have acceptance, we might just get really frustrated and like, why is the art not coming out the way that I wanted to? I think it's important to accept that it doesn't always, but also that it is part of the journey, which leads me into how I think about freedom in general. I think the way people think about having freedom in your art practice is very related to how people think about talent in an art practice. It's like this idea that, oh, either you have this sort of quote unquote creative genius where you just can create sort of out of nothing, the same way people think about quote unquote talents of artists. Oh, like you can achieve that just because it was something you were born with. And although for sure I think there's people that have a knack for it is going to be more interested and keep maybe developing their art practice, as any artist that practices knows, it's definitely hard work, is a lot of hard work is involved. So for me, freedom is very related to that, and it's in the same way it's also very untrue. Our inner visions are not created out of nothing. It's something that is created throughout, well, and this is what I think is so great about art too, because everything is literally art. Everything is in life is art. It's how their school looked, how they transported themselves to that school. Like every single act of living that we have engaged in makes it way into our art, which is pretty freaking amazing. And the same thing is true when it comes to the references that makes its way in there. Like the references that we have are going to make its way into our art, and maybe perhaps in a more obvious way than life experience does, but I think they are a very, very important aspect of the arts that we create. So what we aesthetically draw on is this like big orb, but also the techniques that we use draws from the techniques that we have learned. Nobody's ever gonna sit down at a blank canvas and just be like psh, 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 psh. When we work, we are drawing on all our experiences as artists as well, and their technique, every little like mistakes that we have made, every little pencil brush or whatever. So, you know, just to kind of distill this into something that makes a point here. So all these things come together. Essentially, this is what freedom is. The same way that this is what talent is. It is essentially all the things that we do, that we have learned. And so what does this mean for us as artists? It means that in order to achieve that sense of freedom where we can just splash around and have where that gut feeling just appears and we can trust it and we can go with it, is a journey. Wherever we are in our journey, we should never be frustrated or feel like we're not enough, because every piece of art that we put out, even if it feels really controlled or not at all what we were going for, it is a step towards achieving that freedom. freedom is just input. Freedom is just having a lot of references to draw from. So if we get so frustrated that we give up on our craft or pause from our craft or don't create as much as we otherwise would if we wouldn't feel this like frustration and perfectionism, then we are hindering ourselves to continue the journey that will lead us to the point where we have a sense of freedom, or at least more of a sense of freedom. Acceptance here is key, and trusting the process, and you'll get there. I will say one more thing about like freedom and control and getting out of having art that's really controlled and detailed. I'm sure there's like a lot of exercises that you can do and all just to get out of a rut, but I also think one thing that I will say about making art that's really controlled is that when I've done it in my life, feeling like I'm too detailed oriented and I spend like a ridiculous amount of time, and there's like, it's not about the time, but where I'm spending time in a sense where I don't have the confidence to leave an artwork when I know it's done, but I gotta perfect it, and then it just moves closer and closer to something that looks realistic in the way that I wasn't looking for originally. It's usually because there are shit going on in my life. Honestly, I think when we have chaos in our lives, when we are having like financial stress, when we are having relationship stress, when we are having all these type of stresses, I feel it comes into the artwork, and it is easy because it makes us feel like there is something that we can control, or at least that's how I feel. I will spend an obscene amount of time on artworks, usually when I'm unhappy, just to make them feel very restricted. And then that increases my frustration, and I go, oh my god, why can't I create what I want to create? Again, I think acceptance here is really, really important, because we cannot always control our circumstances and put ourselves in circumstances where we are creating the best work that we do. But I will say this, that when I create, I always feel more of a calm, and even though work come out not exactly that way that I wanted to, and it turns into like a way of coping, that is also okay, because again, that is part of your life. That is part of your journey. It's never going to be separated from you as a person. So even if you do not feel like it fully represents the goals that you have and you want to achieve, it's still you. You're still putting something out into the world that is valuable. It does not have to be perfect. It is something, whether you are dealing with subject matter directly in your art or not, you are always getting something of yourself into the world, and the world needs you. Art is fucking important. Art is like, that's like a resistance to all the bullshit, automated bullshit that's going on. So keep going, and I'm gonna end it there. I know that this content is so different from what I usually do in my short content, and I know probably nobody's gonna watch it, and that's okay, but I noticed yesterday when I sat down and just talked that I actually really quite enjoyed it. Not even like, I don't care, you know, not for like the sense of viewership, because sometimes with the shorts everything is so fast and it has to like really show off an artwork. It's very produced, takes a long time. I end up feeling like I get a little bit stagnant in it sometimes. So just coming on here and talking, putting some of my thoughts into the world is cool. But of course, it would also be cool if it could be a conversation at some point. But if it's not, it's not, and it's just a conversation with myself. Cool also. So yeah, thank you for watching if you did, and I hope you have a lovely day and keep creating art. That's the most important thing.